President.
Senator from Vermont is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. President, I wanted to say a few words about the nature of the economy today, the cause of the very deep recession that we're currently in, and what I think we have got to do about it. Right now, our country is experiencing the worst economy since the Great Depression of the 1930s. While officially unemployment is 9.7%, the reality is that we have some 19% of our people who are either unemployed or underemployed, people who would like to work 40 hours a week, but they're only working 20 or 30 hours a week. And the crisis that we are addressing today is magnified by the reality that the recession for the middle class and working families of this country didn't just begin in the fall of 2008 with the financial crisis. In fact, the middle class has been collapsing for a very, very long time. During the Bush administration, over 8 million Americans slipped out of the middle class and into poverty. Today, some 40 million Americans are living in poverty. During the Bush years, median household income declined by over $2,100. Middle-class Americans earned more income in 1999 than they did in 2008. And middle-class men earned more money in 1973 than they did in 2008, with inflation being accounted for. When we look at people in this country who are angry, there is the reason. After working long and hard hours, tens of millions of Americans find themselves in worse economic shape today than they were 10 years ago or even 20 years ago. Meanwhile, while the middle class shrinks and poverty increases, while more and more people lose their health insurance, so today we have 46 million with no health insurance at all, while 4 million American workers have lost their pension over the last 9 years, we continue to see in this country the most unequal distribution of wealth and income of any major country on earth. And that growing inequality is a moral obscenity, but it is a very serious economic problem as well, because we become a nation in which very few have a whole lot, while a whole lot of people have very, very little. Mr. President, the immediate recession was caused, as I think everybody knows, by the greed, the recklessness, and the illegal behavior of a small number of giant financial institutions on Wall Street. These people were not content to making 40% of the profits being made in America. Their CEOs were not content to earn bonuses of tens of millions of dollars a year. The hedge funds were not content to have their owners and managers become billionaires. No, that was not good enough. So what these financial tycoons had to do was to develop and produce worthless, complicated financial instruments which plunged our country and much of the world into a deep recession. To the, I think, frustration of the American people, a year and a half has passed since the financial collapse. And what has happened? What actions have the Congress taken to rein in Wall Street, to tell Wall Street that their greed is not acceptable in this country, that they cannot continue to go forward with actions that destroy our economy and the lives of millions of people? Within a short period of time, the Senate will be considering legislation dealing with financial reform. And I want to congratulate Senator Dodd and others on the Banking Committee for a lot of the hard work that they have done in producing a bill which in a number of ways moves us forward. But what I want to say this evening is that moving us forward is not good enough. The American people want an end now to the recklessness and irresponsibility of Wall Street. They want an accounting, and they want real change. They want, in my view, a new Wall Street which invests in the productive economy, in small and medium-sized businesses that actually produce real products and real services and which actually create real jobs, rather than the activities of Wall Street, which is a giant gambling casino playing with financial instruments that nobody understood and which at the end of the day produces nothing real. As the debate over financial reform moves on, I intend to play an active role in fighting for a number of concepts. And let me just enumerate a few of them. Number one, right now, people in the state of Vermont, in the state of Colorado, state of Rhode Island, all over this country are paying usurious interest rates on their credit cards. And I use the word usury advisedly. We now take it for granted, and we accept the fact that our friends and neighbors and family members are paying 20, 25, 30, 35% interest rates on their credit cards. That is wrong, that is unjust, and in fact, according to every major religion on earth, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, it is immoral. It is immoral to lend money to people who desperately need that money and then suck the blood out of them, because when they're desperate, they're going to have to pay 30 or 35% interest rates. That is immoral. That is wrong. And, Mr. President, over the years, a number of states have said, including Vermont, we're going to prohibit usury. You can't do it. You can't charge more than 10%, 12%, 15%, whatever it is. But all of those laws were made null and void by a Supreme Court decision, which resulted in credit card companies being able to go to states which had no usury law, and therefore they could sell their product all over this country with no limit. Let us be clear. Those large financial institutions were charging Americans 25, 30, 35% interest rates on their credit card are no better than loan sharks. And in the old days, what loan sharks used to do, used to break kneecaps if people couldn't repay their loans. Well, these guys don't break kneecaps, but they are destroying lives just the same. People are desperate. They're borrowing money. We have all been to the grocery store. We're seeing people buying milk and bread with their credit cards, gas to get to work with their credit cards, because that's the only source of revenue they now have available to them, paying 25 or 30%. We've got to eliminate that once and for all. And I will be bringing forth an amendment which does nothing more than what credit unions now exist under. Credit unions in this country, by law, cannot charge more than 15% interest rates, except under exceptional circumstances, and now they can go up to 18%, but most of them don't. Vast majority of them don't. I don't think that is asking too much. Second of all, I'm going to bring forth language which will increase transparency at the Federal Reserve. And this is an issue, interestingly enough, that brings some of the most conservative members and some of the most progressive members together. I remember a year or so ago, Chairman of the Fed, Ben Bernanke, came before the Budget Committee on which I serve, and I asked him a very simple question. I said, Mr. Bernanke, my understanding is that you have lent out trillions of dollars at zero interest loans to financial institutions. Trillions of dollars. Can you please tell me and the American people which financial institutions received that money and what the terms were? I don't think that that was an unreasonable question, trillions of dollars. And he said, no, Senator, I'm not going to do it. And we have since introduced legislation to make them do it, and so forth and so on. It is beyond my comprehension that we do not know which financial institutions have received trillions of dollars of zero or close to zero interest loans. We don't know about the conflicts of interest that may have existed. Mr. President, in that regard, let me just talk about a scam which is quite unbelievable that goes on today. What goes on today is that companies like Goldman Sachs borrow money from the Fed, and I have no reason to doubt that Goldman Sachs also was on the receiving end of these zero-interest loans, and they borrow this money for 0.1%, maybe 0.25%, and then they take that money and then they invest it in U.S. Treasury securities at 3.5% or 4%. Now that is a pretty good deal. Talk about welfare. Borrow money at 0 or 0.5%, lend it to the United States government, which has the entire faith and credit of American history behind it, and you make 3%, 4%. What a deal. That's a pretty good deal. I think we've got to end those types of practices, and we have got to move forward with real transparency at the Fed. Mr. President, the other thing that we have got to do, which is enormously important, is banks have got, these large financial institutions have got to start lending money to small and medium-sized businesses who are prepared to create meaningful jobs in this country. Early today, I think you and I heard from former President Clinton, who made a very important point. He believes, and I agree with him, that we can make profound changes in our economy, that over a period of years we can create millions of jobs as we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and to sustainable energy. There are small businesses who are in the energy business in this country who are ready to go to create the jobs if they can get reasonable loans, and they can't get that money today. We can transform our energy system, we can give a real spurt to our economy, we can create good-paying jobs, but we have got to demand that Wall Street start investing in the real economy. Another issue that I intend to play an active role on is this issue of too big to fail. I've said it once and I've said it many times. If an institution, financial institution, is too big to fail, it is too big to exist. Today we have 4 major financial institutions, which if any one of them collapsed today, they would bring down the entire economy. And what we have got to do is start breaking them up now. And we have got to take action at this point. So, Mr. President, I think the American people are angry, and they're angry for some good reasons. They are hurting financially. As I mentioned earlier, there are millions of Americans today who have seen a substantial decline in their income and are working incredibly hard, and they're wondering what has happened. And then despite all of that, the trend that has led to the collapse of the middle class as a result of Wall Street greed, we have been driven into a major recession. The American people want us to have the courage to stand up to Wall Street. And I should say that in 2009 alone, our good friends on Wall Street who have unlimited resources spent $300 million in lobbying this institution. $300 million. Now, when they fought for the deregulation over a period of 10 years, they spent $5 billion to be able to engage in the activities which they did engage in, and that led us to the recession that we're in right now. So these guys, I guess they could borrow zero-interest loans from the Fed. I don't know if they can use that for lobbying or whatever, but they have literally an unlimited sum of money. I think the American people want us to have the courage to stand with them, to take these guys on, no matter how powerful and wealthy they may be. And I think the eyes of the country and the eyes of the world will be on what we do.